Hello and welcome to episode 97 of the Accountant Success Secrets podcast. Every week we talk with an accountant whose journey we hope will inspire others in practice. I'm one of your co-hosts, Mark Lee. I also run the Sole Practice Club and I'm a mentor for sole practitioner accountants.
And I'm Philippa, Haynes, brand and marketing support for accountants and bookkeepers, helping you to stand out for all the right reasons.
Our interviewees all have different backgrounds, different reasons for setting up their practice, different experiences along the way, and different ambitions.
Yeah, so we explore their personal stories, starting with why and how they started their firm, the highs, the lows, and of course, the lessons they have learned.
Our aim is to identify what makes them tick and to highlight useful insights and secrets that you can apply straight away.
Yeah, so if you'd like to share your story in a future episode, do please get in touch.
Today, our guest is Dan Heelan, an AAT licensed accountant who started Heelan Associates 19 years ago. Based in Waterlooville in Hampshire, there's now over 40 in the team, which continues to grow. They offer all the normal accountancy services, including bookkeeping, payroll, accountancy, and business advice. Dan admits to being a major geek. Beyond that, one of the many impressive things about Dan is that his Heelan Associates YouTube channel has over 330 very well produced and informative videos and almost 65,000 subscribers. I can but dream of replicating that.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to obviously talk about that a lot more, but for now, welcome to the podcast. And is there anything you'd like to add or clarify that we've not added in?
No, I love the intro. Thanks very much. I mean, you said about inspiring others. I don't know, maybe depressing them might be. I don't know. We'll find out as we go, I guess. The only other thing is it ticked. You said about 350 videos. I think I've done a lot more than that, but I think we delisted about 100 of them. There was over 450 at one point. It's just we'll talk about it, I'm sure. But my YouTube strategist of these days told me that I needed to delist a load, so we have. But yeah, making content's been a bit of a hobby of mine for the last sort of 6 years ish. I think just before COVID.
Fabulous. I'm really going to have some great conversations about that, I think. But before we do, we should mention our sponsor of the podcast, Pinnacle Global Group, the trusted offshoring partner to over 150 accounting and bookkeeping firms across the UK and Ireland. They are led by London-based chartered accountant Mayank Pandya. He's got offices in London and Mumbai and a team of over 300 professionals. They provide compliance resourcing from accountants, bookkeepers and payroll admins to tax and audit associates. And of course, there's the value-added support too, including management accountants, virtual finance controllers, financial analysts and more. Of course, they're GDPR compliant, ISO certified, covered by professional indemnity insurance, and of course, they offer flexible models, full-time, part-time, or pay as you go. You can even start with a trial period or join their sponsored trip to Mumbai to meet the rest of the team in person. So find out more at www.pinnacleoss.co.uk or click the link wherever you're listening to this podcast.
Also supporting the podcast is the Tax Advice Network. Their website enables accountants to choose specific specialist tax advisors for general tax support or for help across any of over 100 areas of tax. It's free to use. You just pay the tax advisor that you choose after agreeing terms with them, whether for ad hoc advice or a regular tax clinic style support service for your practice. Go take a look at their website, findataxadvisor.online, where you can also register to get their weekly tax tips, which are written especially for general practitioner accountants.
Yeah. Finally, before we start, a quick reminder that you can support the podcast and get exclusive bonus content by subscribing on Patreon.
Just download the Patreon app, subscribe, and you'll get the bonus episodes through your usual podcast player. Details are in the show notes.
Right, let's get back to the guest. As you know, we aim to keep the podcast to around 30 minutes and we have a few key questions.
Yeah, so I'll go first. Dan, how and why did you come to set up Heelan Associates?
Well, that's a cool question, actually, because the answer I have to give is I didn't. So what, in a way, so, and I'll explain this. So oddly, I actually hated the idea of accountancy. So my mum, was a bookkeeper, had a very small client base out of her conservatory. And, as you're growing up, every now and then she's like, do you want to come and, as it was back then, giant calculators and staple stuff and write on analysis pads. I was like, this is literally the most boring thing ever. Why would you do this as a job? So I hated the idea. Ended up going off into retail management, oddly, was my first kind of career. But I always loved the business side. Even at school, I say the only thing I was all right, but my best grades were always in business studies and that kind of stuff. And I don't know, I'm a child of the 80s, so I grew up watching corporate America 80s films, and it always looked like a cool thing to be able to do. But in a weird chain of events that I won't bore you with in 30 minutes, I ended up becoming self-employed and having multiple kind of things going on. And I moved back into the area. And I'd got really frustrated around the tax. I didn't understand what I was doing. My mates never seemed to be paying the right amount of tax. There was always that kind of thing. And like all sons, I didn't believe a word my mum said, so I never believed what she told me about it. So I thought, I should study up on this. So then I got into it, and then decided. I said, look, actually, I like this. I'm going to retrain. Let's. And she had a small few clients in the conservatory, so I said, yeah, I'll come work with you, stick me another chair in the conservatory, and then we'll maybe build this out if it works. And that was about 20 years ago. I think I joined about 9 months after the limited company existed, and just the two of us, and then we grew it out from there. As you say, we're up to 40 plus at the moment. We've got, as I'm sure we'll talk about at the end, I want to plug some roles. So we've always got some growth on the go, so we're looking for mid 40s at the minute. And it's been cool from there. So yeah, it was that feeling of I need to know this stuff. Accountancy's scary. I feel like I could be good at this and good at explaining it to people.
Yeah. And the rest is history. And Mum was right, wasn't she? Your mum was right.
No, she's never been right, actually. She stopped trying to be right now. I'm like, well, where does it say that? Where does it say that?
Oh, poor Mum. I feel for her.
I would be bully her.
At what point did you do your AAT studies then, Dan?
Early on. And it's a bugbear of mine to talk about, so I won't go on my high horse about it. But I also applied for the ACCA at the time, but they wrote back to me and said, you are operating a business and therefore can't be a student. So, and it's never changed. I think, so one of the real pros, and I always talk to people about this, is accounting is a great career to roll into because you can get experience while you do it. The challenges with some of those professional chartered bodies is there's a barrier that you can't overcome, and it turns into an old boys club. That really frustrates me. But generally, it's a fantastic career to be able to re-roll into. So I love it. So yeah, as it was early on in the career, I did that alongside it. You just went to college and did it, and the practical experience helps obviously when you're doing it.
And how did you build it? How did you build up your sorry, Philippa? How did you
go
build up
on.
your client base?
So initially, there's two phases to this really. There's the initial phase of you bumbling along, trying to figure out what you're doing, learning. Customer service in our industry is awful, always has been, still is as an overall. So it really wasn't hard to differentiate it when I came from a retail service background, and you're like, okay, look, you just phone people and talk to them, and guess what? They like it. So that got a lot of initials, a lot of initial referrals. And that kind of stuff. I didn't even have a website probably for the first 5 years. There's all referral work. I'm sure there's a lot of accountants, from those days that will kind of see that, that would have been their journey as well. And then, if you look at really, we had massive growth from 2020 onwards when we started trying this social media thing, and that, that really catapulted it. But we would also become a much better business because you learn, don't you, through the early days about what works, what doesn't. You start hiring people. Though if you hire the right people, they also bring in, well, are you guys not doing this? And you're like, because remember, I'd never worked in practice, so I didn't have a clue what the done thing was, which is both an advantage and a disadvantage. So I'd be like, oh, that's really cool. Yeah, we could do that. Let's do that. So you sort of rob off everybody that came in, and you look at our procedures now, and what we do is this night and day to how it all worked then, and that's all thanks to the great people we brought in.
So tell us about the social media side of thing then, because I mean, going out onto LinkedIn live and all of that good stuff, there'll be a lot of accountants and bookkeepers, some who are really very good at it and others who are just still terrified of it. So what was your approach, and what made it successful then?
Well, I fell into it in a way. I started to, I've always been interested in business content. So you start watching these influencers who are like, yeah, you need to post on every channel, every day, every minute, what are you doing while you're sleeping? Like it was very much like that. And But algorithms change over time, so approaches change over time. LinkedIn is not what it was 5 years ago. YouTube is not what it was even a year ago. Like, it's crazy the difference. So I think you have to be into it to want to do it. And accountants, we're very, I think generally, there's a stereotype that's often true, is, you know, we're not necessarily the most outgoing type of people wanting to put your head above the parapet. And the problem you have is when you go on social media is you're literally painting the target on your head if you're not ready for it. Now, my experience has been actually different. I've only had I see comments all the time in YouTube where someone either says, my last 6 years of my life has been I either talk too quickly or I don't talk quick enough. You can't please people. So like, once you get over those, you're fine. But, you know, you will do the odd thing that will annoy someone, or you'll say something that's not there, and people just avoid that. So that aside, I think most of it's just about strategy and kind of the tactics of what you post when. But the biggest barrier to all of this is time. Time, I think, is the biggest one. And there's no overcoming that in reality. I think you've got to build a business around it if you want to do it in the long term. But we started putting out, the reason we did it, to come back to that, is just before COVID, I thought it was a really cool way to communicate to the masses in terms of not our own clients. It was just easy to be like, we're doing this thing. And I'd go on my iPhone back then with a light and a 14-pound microphone, and you just relay like either what was happening. You remember in COVID, they always released on a Friday night. So I'd stay up, read the thing on a Friday night, record late Friday night, get it out Saturday morning. And then you had a bit of pace to it in terms of it was relevant and people would watch it. It would get shared in WhatsApp and Facebook groups, and it just generated a bit of interest. And then that turned, once I saw that, and I remember being in on a Saturday and the phone rang and someone said, "Oh, are you the guy from YouTube?" And I was like, "Oh, someone's watching these videos." And he asked me a question, and I sort of half answered it, and then he went, "All right, yeah, by the way, I'm looking for an accountant." And then and I was like, "Oh, okay." And then from then on, it snowballed over the years.
That's lovely. We were saying before we started this that, you know, you were very clear on who you were trying to attract, and that, you know, you'd had conversations where people said, "Oh, you need to be a bit more clickbaity," and all of this kind of stuff. Just talk us through that, because again, I think that's really useful insight for those who are listening in.
Yeah, I mean, the landscape's changed probably in the last year and a half. YouTube's very much, if you're not putting something, if you're not packaging, I think is the technical term for it, very well, in terms of, you know, do somebody want to click on it? Is it slightly negative? Negative videos do very well. I mean, there's been some very fast growing accountancy channels now that have got this really right in terms of getting views on it. The question will be whether you get the right kind of leads and people contacting you. But when I put it out, I didn't have any strategy. I just wanted to communicate the information. There's no calls to action and all these things people tell you to do. It was just people just used to phone up because they liked what I said, or whatever the case would be. But what we did, our learning from that has been that, if you put a video out about it in the tone of, you know, I mean, the sign behind me, you know, tax is a success fee, is kind of like one of our sayings. Like, we're not saying you can't pay no tax. We just want it to be the right fee. And then you tend to get people then gravitate towards you. Whereas if you're putting videos out with clickbait, I hate HMRC, and we never want to pay any tax, those are the type of people that come to you. But I think I would be over-egging it if I said there was any strategy at the beginning. It was just, I just put videos out to communicate knowledge, I guess, the stuff I wanted to know when I became a business owner.
Yeah, and that's really important, I think, because people get frightened that they've got to be perfect. And I think if you don't do something that isn't perfect, then you never actually get on the ladder, do you? So you just need to really start and see where it goes.
There's also, I think, there's diminishing returns depending on what you do. So, for example, I did 8 channels at the back end of last year. I did 111 days straight just to see what would happen of new content across 8 different channels, a new reel a day across TikTok. It grew channels quite quick. So TikTok grew to, I think, 4,000 odd followers quite quickly, loads of views on some of those videos. And it just taught you about what worked and what didn't on that platform. But the actual lead number in percentage, as a percentage for the effort, was not, it's not that it wasn't worth it. It's just at this moment in our time and our journey, it wasn't worth me giving my entire life up to do. So I think it's just worth experimenting is the key. If you've not tried these things, maybe just pick one and go hard on it and play around with it.
That makes sense. And just a point to clarify here, would you say that the majority of people who've approached you as a result of, let's say, your wider social media activity, but specifically the YouTube videos, would you say the majority of them are starting up and haven't had an accountant before, or they've got an accountant and prefer the sound of you, or their accountant's retiring and they've got to find, or sold up and they've got to find a new one? Or is there another category that you've identified?
No, see, I love working with startups, and my team do. So all the content we put out originally was all the kind of how-to startup stuff we didn't know. Surprisingly, the people that watch that are in that situation, and therefore that's the lead you get. If you fast forward that to some of the videos we do now, where we're talking about maybe extraction, or we're talking about various just ideas, really. I mean, it's very difficult. You can't talk too technical. I use the words generally, usually a lot, because you can't. You don't know what someone's situation is, and what I say, I can't say for definite that's right for you, but you can give a lot of information. Those videos generate a lot of established business owners, and actually some of them we refer on to our network if they're not quite right for us. We're very fortunate because the demand's so high. Our I suppose sales team, I hate the word sales because they don't ring they never ring a phone. It's all incoming, but the consultants, as we would call them, they're very fortunate situation where they can pick whether it's a fit for us and whether it's a fit for the client, and some often we'll pass those on. And what I find is, you get what you put out. Like at a certain level, if you're talking about property all the time, you're going to get a lot of property leads. The worst video ever made was a crypto video in the middle of 21, and all we got was crypto leads, and I don't want them. The technology wasn't fitted for it. People didn't have the money to pay for accountants. It was horrible. Like it just soaked time. So yeah, if it works, it's great, but you get what you put out.
Yeah, that's really important, a really important learning there. So, I mean, looking back, where did you expect to be, and are you there, or has it completely changed the plan since you started with your mum, that is?
Yeah, I mean, the problem was I never had, you listen to these entrepreneurs and they're like, oh, I pictured it was going to be whatever. I did have a moment where I wrote down a structure chart when we were about 5 people, and I was trying to explain to my wife how we would need a HR function, because I love doing accountancy and talking to people in business. I hate dealing with HR in terms of, I need to document everything. I'm more than happy to talk to people face to face and do the conversations and all that. I just hate all the documentation that goes with it. And I was talking to her about that. Now that did come true very, very quickly. But outside of that, I didn't picture where it would go, and I still don't now. I just do it to a point where I want to make the business stable and profitable enough that it pays everybody what they want to be paid, and they're enjoying their work, and we've got best in class software. We're able to give the advice that business owners need, and I want it to be like a valued service, and that's what we build towards. And actually, if we talk about learnings, it would be one of them about profits. I can talk on that, but so yeah, the answer is it grew. The speed at which it grew was far outstripped anything I ever pictured, but I kind of felt that we would get there eventually. Like, we did have a really good referral system, and one of the roles that I did early on in my career was sales, so I quite enjoy a bit of sales. So like, I always thought we would grow, but yeah, not that quickly.
No. So let's go on to learnings then, eh?
Yeah. So what would you say you've learned along the way? Well, actually, the reason I hesitated there is because I want to ask you about what you've learned along the way, but I also want to ask that sort of question that comes up with many of our guests who've grown decent sized teams, and I think 40 odd is you are amongst the biggest teams that we've interviewed. Both when you started and there were just a few of you, and compared with now, your website indicates that you're always willing to talk to people who think they might like to work at Heelan Associates. So I get the distinct impression that you'll recruit and then find the work, rather than necessarily wait till everybody's overburdened and then try and fill the gaps. Has it always been like that, or?
I think once the system came, I mean, the social media has been such a ridiculous system for us. That provided we content, it's like everything.
Sorry, when you say, do you mean lead generation?
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. And it turned into, and this is one of the learnings, is that I always talk about social media not being a secret money machine. It won't suddenly generate overnight, but when it does work, what the impact on your systems, how you're processing the time, because you imagine like the normal accountancy practice, I don't know how many leads you get, but it's quite often other prospects will say to us, oh, well, I had an hour and a half chat with this other accountant. I'm not going to go with them, but I had a chat with them. And it's like, you imagine if every lead that phoned up, we put an accountant in front of them, it just wouldn't work. So you suddenly had to adapt the systems and the process. And then, we learned very quickly that we needed to match the type of people we wanted to work with, because if you've been in the position where you're always looking for business, the easy answer is you could just take everything, but that really doesn't work reputationally, and I think more it has an effect on the colleagues in the business when you do that. So yeah, we quite often stagger onboarding to match what I feel's the ebbs and flow of it, because it's seasonal. It's with all the data we've got now, you can tell when everybody's going to want to talk to you and when they want to come on board. So we stagger it. But yeah, very much. If you said here is for really experienced, if you said there's 10, I'll take all 10 right now. Remortgage my house and go for it. You know, there's so much business out there for everybody, and that's the cool thing about the accountancy world. There's a lot of where service is lacking in areas and underinvestment probably in some practices. So there's a lot of business for everybody, I think.
Awesome. That's just wonderful answer. Thank you. So what else have you learned sort of along the way that's helped you get where you are now that perhaps others can learn from? We've talked about sort of, social media and recruitment. What else is there?
I think it really boils down to my mind, as we scaled, it comes down to systems and people. I know it's the cliche one all the time, but I just found that you need systems, you need people, and therefore you need to build a culture that means that, you value culture and people probably more than you do skills and performance. So I can think of a couple of instances where we've had some really high performers that haven't sat culturally well, and we've had to make a tough choice. And figures wise, that would be the detrimental choice to make. And it caused, particularly one time I can remember, caused quite a lot of pain. And that individual did a fantastic job, absolutely fantastic job, but culturally was a problem. It's a tough break to make. So I think prioritizing that is always key if you're trying to build something. I think that we talked about profits. I think that it's really important to both make them at a gross profit level so that your model is sustainable. And I think that's the first thing you learn when you transition from being, say, a sub 10 person practice to higher, is you realize you don't make as much money as you think you do once you start having to pay people and reward them, and you want to keep them, and you want to pay for their training and professional memberships and whatever else you want to do, like as a business. You need to make gross profit. But the net profit, I think it's really important. I see a lot of people living up their life, and that's great. Again, if you want that lifestyle, that's cool. I live relatively modestly. I hate cars with a passion, and all those profits go back into reinvestment and trying to grow the business. So I think, again, it just depends on your outlook on life. If you want to, I want to grow something meaningful. I don't know how long I'm here on earth, but I would like to think that when I'm disappeared, that that brand and people will associate accountancy and good accountancy with it, and that takes time and effort and money. And I think the other thing that I learned very quickly is that you've just got to get friends in the industry. And I mean, like, network and pay for that if you need it. Pay for it. Invest in your own skills, invest in coaching, mentoring. One of the biggest things that opened my mind is I invested in, I won't name it because I don't know where the associations lie here, but I invested in a particular type of coaching around pricing and things like that, because I didn't know what I didn't know. Again, I was just making up as I went along. And it really opened my eyes to how much little we were charging for certain things. And I have this conversation constantly with other owners now who are new, and they're like, I'm charging this. And I'm like, are you mental? Like, just work out this, and this. You're not making any money. But and it's not about how much money to line in your pocket. Going back to what I said, to me, it's about, if you want to grow a sustainable business that's best in class and that people want to come to work for you, and the building's nice and all the benefits that are there, you need to make money on paper. So getting that pricing right is probably the biggest, earliest learning.
I think, and that's really valuable. And you said something else before we started recording, I think, in terms of when you get approached by large organizations that might want to buy you, you're not interested in that sort of stuff. But you said something about margins there, and you said 25%.
Yeah, it's interesting in that I speak to a lot of people who are either working for private equity businesses, or they're running smaller practices, and they're saying, oh yeah, like our goal is 25% gross profit margin. I look at 25% and think I'd rather be selling retail shop and make me 30. Like, I don't know, it's 25% seems crazy, but obviously if you've got volume, that's fine. But we're in professional services, 25% I'd argue is not the greatest. So, but what I found when we went early on in our journey is when you're the owner delivering it, a lot of the time your margins will look good and you'll think you'll be flexing. You'll be like, yeah, I'm making 75% plus, and it's your wages. And when you actually factor, then if you had to replace yourself, it's never that. So but I think that concentrating, and that's just normal business play, right? Concentrating on your gross profit is going to lead to good results. But I think sometimes you just need a bit of external input sometimes to validate that, whether that's somebody in the industry that can just be in your ear and say, X and Y are charging this for it, or you've got coaches that will tell you that this is the case. But the pricing is important.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's a lot of learning, obviously. What are the sort of mistakes that stand out? And I'm sure it's like everything, there's probably been thousands over the years, but anything in particular that you can share with us?
Yeah, I think structurally. So we had a couple of and this is why I think always innovating and being willing to destroy what you've done and like rebuild. I always think of business building like Lego. You know, you look at it and you think you might build a really tall tower and then realize your foundations are a bit wobbly, and that sometimes the only option is to destroy the tower and rebuild it. And I've certainly, from a structural point of view internally, I've done it a few times where I've pivoted the way we're structured, and those learnings come with pain for people involved, because nobody likes change, or very few people, I should say, like change. So I think it's the main mistakes would probably be not systemizing early enough. That would be key. I think when you're 1 to 5 people, you think it's all easy, you just train people. And even now I battle with some people, sometimes I say battle in a good way, with some of my managers where they're like, oh, do we really need a system for this? I'm like, yes, because what I didn't do when I was 5 people was work out what it would look like when we were mid-40s. And now what I'm thinking is, what if I was 80? Like, how do you scale that? So I think the mistake is not generating enough systems. And then the other one was there were points where I probably took my foot off in terms of learning and self-development. I love the self-development world. I think it's awesome and it can give you a lot of inspiration. And there were times where I think business is often like seasons. There's seasons being really, really busy and doing crazy stuff. And then there's sometimes where you take your foot off, and I stopped developing myself, and then you stop innovating to a degree. And these are all like small things. They're like, no one would have noticed anything. It's just, I know when I look back at it, I'm like, do you know what? That 2-year period could have been completely different if I'd done this or that. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. But I think, as you say, it's very easy to become, I'll use the word complacent, which I think is a bit strong, but you know, unless you're stepping forward all of the time, that desire to continue to step forward really decreases, doesn't it? So you need to keep going. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, it's tough. And again, self-development and those kind of things are important. Like, if I'd never invested in the pricing guy that I spoke to at the time, that was an initial thing that gave us more profits to be able to grow and things like that. So you never know what the outcome is. And like this year, without going too deep into it, because it's got some commercial elements I'd rather probably not get into, we developed, I randomly was dropping my son off at my middle son at his GCSE results day. And I sat in a Cafe Nero and designed a program that I thought would be really cool based off talking to a lot of prospects recently. We launched that and it's been massively successful. The way we priced it means that we get cash flow that's even better. And it's like, but that if I hadn't have taken the time to do it or been listening to other input from other industries, things like that, we would have missed the opportunity to do it. So I think it's important as I suppose the leader with little bunny ears to make sure that we're always doing that kind of stuff. And the mistake would have been not doing that consistently.
Yeah,
I get that.
Love that.
Fabulous. I can't believe that our time is coming to a close and how much we have covered. So I definitely wouldn't say you've been speaking too fast, but you've definitely been getting through it, which is astonishing. Having heard everything Dan's been saying, Philippa, and just before I ask him to share his contact details, what would you say makes Heelan Associates and Dan, unique and successful?
Well, I think Dan can speak for himself there, and the 30 minutes that we've had with him. I guess you always ask me this question, and just listening for the 30 minutes, I think the insight is that kind of rolling stone that gathers no moss. There is something around your kind of approach and even breaking things. You're not afraid to do that and to keep moving forward. And I suspect that the people who you attract, the clients, are of a similar nature, as long as you're putting that out on your sort of marketing reels, which I suspect you are. So yeah, absolutely fantastic stuff. Really love it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. And Dan, how can listeners find out more about you and your firm?
I would probably say don't go to the website because it's rubbish. It always has been. We're actually having it redone, but do you know how low it is on the priority list? That the guy's been chasing me for 6 months to sign off the new one. I'm just like, whatever, I'm not bothered. So I would probably say to people, look, if you're interested, particularly I'm talking to accountants now, we're always recruiting for growth. We've got fantastic, I think it's a cool thing. It's challenging to come into a business that's always growing and is always innovating because there's change. But if you like that and you're sitting out back, you're not getting exposure to clients, which is a big thing we're hearing. Our team would love to talk to you about what that might look like. We've always got roles out. We're always willing to receive recruiter CVs and all the rest of it. So what I would do is firstly check out the YouTube channel, because hopefully you can get a vibe for the type of accountancy we are. And then there is a heelanassociates.co.uk/careers page, which would have the most active jobs. But honestly, if you feel like, look, is there something for me? I'm looking for a move. Just send something in. There's contact details all over there. We'll always look at them. We keep a talent pool.
Do you need people to come into to be based close to Waterlooville to be in the office?
Most of our guys have got the option of 2-day hybrid. Not many take it actually, but yeah, it's not fully remote, but we do have hybrid options.
Gotcha. So worth remembering, you're based in Waterlooville in Hampshire.
Yeah.
Take that.
Yeah. As my LinkedIn inbox fills up frequently with people that don't even reside anywhere near the office. So yeah.
Thank you ever so much for that, Dan. And in our extra bonus interview for Patreon subscribers only, we'll be asking Dan to talk about the biggest challenges he's currently facing in his practice, how he's addressing them, and how he's integrating AI into his practice. But before that, Philippa, how can listeners find out more about you?
Yeah, well, you can probably find me on LinkedIn. That's the best way. I'm supporting accountants and bookkeepers to stand out. And if you're not like Dan, who seems to have got it nailed with kind of his marketing and social media, etc., and his brand even, then do get in touch. You know, I'm all about what makes your practice unique and how we can sort of drive the business forward. What about you, Mark?
Well, online everywhere. I'm Bookmark Lee. Even the business card is a bookmark. Although when I was at Fab last week, I think I only had 2 requests for bookmarks. So maybe they're not as popular as they.
Sign of the time.
Yeah, quite possibly. Website bookmarklee.co.uk. LinkedIn, Mark Lee FCA. I work with sole practitioners. You can have one-off consultations. You can join the Sole Practice Club. You can have one-to-one mentoring. It all starts with a conversation where between us we agree what's right for you, and that may be thanks for the conversation, because I'm not going to push anybody to work with me. I'm not at that. I'm not at a stage in my career where I need to do that. I just want, as Dan said, I'm just keen to help others in the profession to be more successful on their own terms. So I'm not even pushing people to achieve more growth than they feel comfortable with. If we're not already connected, do connect with me, please, on LinkedIn, and follow, and Philippa and Dan, and follow the podcast on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Patreon.
Yeah, but sadly, that's all we have time for today on the main podcast. A massive thanks to Dan, who will hopefully stay with us and chat more. But before we do that, let's thank our sponsor of the podcast, Pinnacle Global Group, your trusted offshoring partner. Check out their website and let their CEO, Mike, know that you heard about them through this podcast.
And thanks to the Tax Advice Network, the easiest way for accountants to reach specialist tax advisors. Remember, there's no charge for using the website findataxadvisor.online, where you can also access their weekly tax tips written especially for general practitioner accountants.
Yeah, if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, share, and leave a review on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube. It makes a real difference.
Thank you very much, Philippa. Thanks again to Dan. Next week, our guest on episode 98 will be Alexis Kingsbury. Please get in touch with Philippa or me if you'd like to be interviewed on the podcast in May.
Yeah, but before then, we are now going to be moving on to Patreon for our subscribers. So please head over to our Patreon page if you'd like to subscribe, patreon.com/accountant success secret singular. That's where you'll hear about the biggest challenges currently facing Dan and his approach to them. We also ask guests about how they're integrating AI into their practices.
Otherwise, until next week on the podcast or anywhere else we might meet online or in real life, bye-bye for now.
Bye.